Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Peter Dyke from NHS Digital here, Programme Head for the Windows 10 and Advanced Threat Protection Programme. Thanks so much for taking the time to join this first of our regular monthly webinar calls. Just a few ground rules before we start. If you can make sure that you keep on mute because there's about 100 people on the call, so it's going to be busy otherwise. If you've got any questions, just use chat facility to put them in. And if you copy them to everyone, that'll help spark other people's questions as well, which will get the debate going. We'll come back to the questions at the end, so it just means that we won't lose them. So we'll start now and carry on. I will be sending out slides after the meeting to everyone, and we're recording this as well, which will be available afterwards. So that you'll be able to send the slides around to everyone in your teams to make sure that they're aware of what's happening. So without any more ado, I'll go on. So I think that's the welcome and introductions done. What I'm going to do is go through the overview of what the programme is about, just a reminder, because some people will be new to it, where we are at the moment. I'll go through the key messages for this month of what we're doing. I'll then hand over to Jeff Young from Microsoft, who's working with us, and he's going to give an overview of all the help and support that's already available for Windows 10 for your teams to use. I'm then going to hand over to Kevin Flaherty from Blackpool. Blackpool are very well advanced in their Windows 10 rollout. I think they're up to about 70% now and have fully deployed advanced threat protection. So any questions you've got about from their learning, then please take this opportunity. And what we'll do on these calls is that we'll feature people who are more advanced in ATP and Windows 10 deployment, so we can use those opportunities to learn each month as we go through. I'll then go through all the support we've got available for the autumn, and then we'll have some questions and answers, and there'll be plenty of time for that. And then I'll just finalise on the next steps, and off we go. So hopefully that'll be a useful update on the programme for everybody. Okay, to take a step back of what we are doing at the moment, we've gone out and we've bought 1 million licenses for Windows 10, and those are available for local organisations to deploy. And we've also, part of that, bought the Advanced Threat Protection Service. And the way that works is it picks up the telemetry from local devices, and that's for Windows 7, 8 and 10, and I'll be coming back to that later. That's now fully working and available to deploy everywhere. And then the best way to look at that is that's like a second line of defense to existing AV services. And then you can see everything going on in your estate locally. You'll see your machines because they're tagged to your ODS code, or the ODS code of organizations that you manage. And then we get the national picture at the back at the Data Security Centre at NHS Digital to look across the system and help pinpoint things that are going on that you don't necessarily just see at local level. The way that ATP works is the identity management is parented off the NHS Mail as your Active Directory. That's why everyone needs NHS Mail accounts, just for the administrators of the service. And you can either be a controller or a reader. Controllers can intervene with machines and manage them. Readers can see but not touch, so you can decide what administration levels you give there. And that's how the service works. In terms of I mentioned earlier that we'd got 1 million licenses. Now, when we bought these, the problem with the NHS is that it's always very difficult to know precisely how many licenses you need until you go through an exercise like this. And since you can't give licenses back, you have to make sure you don't buy quite enough. So we knew that 1 million wasn't going to be quite enough, but we didn't know how much more we'd need to do. Now everyone's been signing up to service agreements, then we know exactly how many we need to order. So we're going back to DH to get some more now, and hopefully we'll have the approval to provide those to people that have now signed up but couldn't get any of the first 1 million by the end of November. And we'll take any questions on the process there later as we go through if you've got any. So everyone on the call today is a mix of people who've either got licenses and can deploy right now, and a few people who are still waiting to licenses and just have to wait for another month. Okay. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Looking at the progress that we've had to date on this, this has been quite quick to start up. the contract was signed back in April, so literally 5 months ago to the day, on the 27th of April. We've been through the process of making licenses available, getting the ATP core service live so our early adopters could prove that it all worked, and we came up with a few issues on that, mostly around role-based access control, which have now been fixed, so all of the issues that there were have now gone. We authorised people to do restricted deployment at the end of June, and a lot of people, we've actually up to, excuse me, I'll just go back one slide. A lot of people have been deploying. We've got about 145 people now deployed ATP across 65,000 machines across the estate. So everyone's been doing that up to now, and we're at the point today where full ATP deployment is approved. So from now on, everyone can now deploy ATP fully across their estate. So that should be relatively straightforward for all of those who've already done it, and all of those who haven't gone live on ATP. It's really straightforward and quick, and we'll help you get there. And so if you're licensed, you can deploy it. If you're not licensed, sadly, you'll have to wait until the end of November when you get licenses and then can deploy. In the meantime, everyone who's got licenses can continue their migration to Windows 10, and we can start build on that, and that will go through from here on. So that's where the program is at the moment. If you want to look at the ATP deployment status pictorially, then this is the dashboard that we use to monitor progress. So if I just quickly go through that, there's around about 743 organisations in the NHS that have got something to do with using IT. And those are broadly managed by around about 239 organisations. So, for example, HISs and CSUs manage IT for others, and some trusts manage IT for others. So you've got this parent-child split of around about, at the moment in terms of the sign-up, we've got 239 parents signed up, and then another 376 child organisations. So can't quite add that up in my head, but it's around about 600 and something of the 700 total organisations. Of those, 145 are already live, 61,000 machines are live. And I think the key thing I'd say is this is sort of the evidence that ATP works. Some people do get connectivity problems in trying to set up connections for the first time. It's generally not the ATP service, it's a connectivity issue, but we can get to the bottom of that very easily by working with you. ATP is generating shed loads of alerts already. We'll come back to that later. And as you see over here, it's all different types of Windows 10. Windows devices are live on ATP, Windows 7 versions and Windows 8 and Windows 10. So that's where we are at the moment. If we look at the Windows 10 deployment across the NHS, hopefully this is an idea of where sort of you are in the process. Around about 11% of NHS devices are on Windows 10 already, around about 2% on Windows 8.1, and that means the rest, the 87%, are still on Win 7. So that's the overall average at the moment. And on the right here, you sort of see that this is where we are with the ATP deployments. That's Blackpool, who you'll be hearing from shortly, well away in the lead. And actually in the process, you can see there, they've already discovered more devices than they had back in May when they registered. So that's why ATP is deployed to more than they originally declared. Now that's useful because we can set that sort of, it means that we can manage the licensing without having to keep calling it up all the time. But if you look there, you know, quite a lot of organisations of our early adopters already rolled out really widely. And it just takes a matter of weeks to actually roll out ATP across the estate if you've got a well-managed estate and the ability to do it. So it can be done, and so that's what we're looking for people to do now. Okay, next slide. Oops, excuse me. So the key messages really for now. We've been through the summer where we were fixing a few of the initial bugs and going through the initial making sure that ATP was working fully before we pushed to roll it out. And the long and the short of it is it works, and we'd like you now to roll it out across all Windows devices as soon as you can. To give an idea of the value, I suppose, here, ATP is worth a significant component of the license cost. So obviously, the sooner we can use it, then the sooner we get the return on the investment. But more importantly than that, the sooner you deploy it, the sooner you're better protected. And I think Darren's case study, which was completely unprompted, that we sent in the other day from the Northumberland Tyne and Wear, is sort of typical. It really can help you manage your estate to complement everything you've got there at the moment. So please don't look on this as sort of an onerous thing to do. It's relatively straightforward, and it gives you other options. So it must be completed with 6 months of license key issue. That's the service agreement everyone's signed up to. What I would suggest, though, is don't just stick to that because it's the worst case date. If you can deploy it earlier because it will be good for you and good for the NHS. Don't want to be halfway through a deployment of this when the next WannaCry strikes. For anyone who's got licenses, therefore, if you target the end of December, that would be great, or earlier. If you're waiting for licenses, obviously it's going to take a little bit longer, so then you'll have until the end of March. And use all help and support available. And the last thing I'd say is the requirement of the service agreement and the requirement of the programme and the requirement of the DH and NHS England and the taxpayer is that these valuable licences are used. And if they're not used, then we will be recovering them for other people who will use them. So please do use them. If that's ATP, an ATP could be deployed fully now. It's not complex. It just needs to be as an agent that goes on the machine, or a switch at 7 on a Windows 7 machine, or a setting on Windows 10. So do that first. Obviously, Windows 10 is more complex and will take longer, and we know all that. But the key thing to say is that there aren't any showstoppers. Many have done this in the NHS already, and there are plenty of examples of good practice to follow, and we'll be bottling those and sharing with you. It is faster, better, safer, more effective, etc. The one thing I should point out is long-term service branch isn't covered in the service agreement. So you need to be on current branch, and that needs to be your strategic plan. That's helped by Microsoft changing the support arrangements. People may have realised recently that the fall editions, so that's the editions that come out in September, October of each year, are now supported for 30 months as opposed to previously it was 18. So that actually helps. And so long-term service branch, no. Key thing to remember is that extended support for Windows 7 ends on January 2020, so we've got 15 months to go. As I said, there is plenty of help and support available. I'll be going into that in more detail now. And so if you've got the licenses, please use them. If you've not got licenses yet, apologies about that, but we'll get those to you in November, subject to Cabinet Office DH approvals. And but if you keep planning on that basis, then that's the way to go. And again, I can't reiterate enough, these are incredibly valuable assets, so if they're not used, we'll give them to somebody else who can use them. Oops, go back up one. So the one thing that might be worth thinking about is planning your own program, and in terms of if I want to make that pictorial as to the trajectories to sort of work to, then if you've got licensing now, you can deploy ATP now, so try and keep ahead of that. Well, please do keep ahead of that red curve to get ATP rolled out across your estate. If you've got to wait a little bit for your licenses, then please, you're going to be following that sort of green curve, slightly delayed, and we accept that that's due to the lack of the licenses. So you've got a bit longer to do that. And for Windows 10, obviously, we're starting down here with about 11% of the estate is there, and the curve needs to go up there. So please try and keep ahead of that curve. It just means that you're going to be getting less emails from me. Okay, so that's where the program is at the moment. What I want to do now is to hand over quickly to Jeff Young, once I find him and the participants to enable him take him off mute. And Jeff's going to be taking us through the support and available of the Windows 10 guides that have been produced by the Microsoft team, and go through there and tell you where to go for some more information. Jeff, just 2 seconds. Hopefully I'll be able to find you and take you off mute. Bear with me.
looks like I took myself off.
Jeff, you are fantastic. It's technical mastery of the service here. So I'll go on mute and I'll give this back to you. Hand over to you.
Okay,
Just tell us what you want to write.
No worries. Hi everyone, it's Jeff Young here, Senior Project Manager at Microsoft. I'm leading the services engagement with NHS Digital and the rest of the NHS. We've been working together for, well, in total it'll be an 18-month engagement. Been working with various NHS organisations and NHS Digital to develop a set of resources which are all targeted around the NHS and to assist you in migrating and adopting Windows 10. So my little session here is just to sort of talk you through what's available and really to encourage you to consume those resources. And we're very open to feedback. You know, we're around until the end of December, so there's time, if you've got particular feedback, there's time for us to pick that up and feed that in so that other organisations can benefit from everyone's collective learning. If you want to hit the next slide, Pete. Okay, so the diagram, the sort of bullseye diagram on the right there, gives a sort of pictorial overview of the materials that we've got available. Right in the center there, we have 3 core guides, which are the Prepare Guide, Deploy Guide, and Operate Guide. I'll touch on the contents of those in a moment, but as you'd expect, they are there to help you plan and prepare for Windows 10, the activities around deploying Windows 10, and then once you've deployed it, what you need to do to keep operating Windows 10 and remaining current. Around those core resources, we've got some other materials. So there's a little document on the prerequisites, things that you need in place in order to be deploying Windows 10. We've got some top recommendations, which are a collection of about 20 sort of recommended activities for you to look at when you're planning a Windows 10 deployment. And there's some further information as well. Other resources such as the previous webinar that's been recorded and some other documentation that we've got available. Then on the very outer ring, we've got some further resources that are perhaps for a kind of a wider audience. So there's the Project Planning Toolkit, which gives you some material to help help project managers and planners to take a look at how we would plan our Windows 10 adoption and pick out from there anything that you feel is useful and relevant for your organization. And similarly, we've got a toolkit for user adoption. We certainly know that getting users on board with the adoption of Windows 10 is very key, and we've put together a collection of materials that we hope you'll be able to dig into, whoever in your organization is responsible for that kind of adoption and change management piece. On the right there, we have what's called the Head Start Toolkit. The Head Start materials are basically based around SCCM, and we appreciate not everyone will be using SCCM. The toolkit is designed to help you help organizations create their Windows 10 Gold image. There's SCCM task sequence in there that assembles the pieces for to deliver a build. There's some stubs in there where you insert certain software that you may require in your particular environment, and that helps take a Windows image, apply a set of customizations, and deliver your Windows 10 Gold build. Aligned to that, we also have some GPO templates which implement the National Cybersecurity Centre guidance, security guidance. So those templates are available for you to import to Active Directory and apply to workstations to basically lock them down. And what we'd encourage people to do is play around with that on 1 or 2 machines to get familiar with what the lockdown can provide. Because it's quite a comprehensive toolkit, we've also got some documents around it, some step-by-step guides, which tell you how to use the task sequence GPOs, and also we've got a document which goes into each of the GPOs, why they're there, what was behind the guidance, so in the NCSC came up with it, and what the controls do. So that's Head Start. Bottom right, the Windows Defender ATP, as Pete said, ATP adoption is well underway, but there are some resources out there for anyone that's yet to sort of really get to grips with that. Things like the previous webinar, there's an onboarding guide and a demo of getting on board with Windows Defender ATP. We have a frequently asked questions document, which originally was created around an initial series of webinars that we ran, but we're now starting to update those and keep those documents updated on a monthly basis with anything new. So we've recently added something in there to do with drivers for Surface Go devices. So we'll be adding to that as a result of feedback and also through our engagement with NHS trusts. There's a webinar series that I'll talk a bit more about in a moment, but we're basically going to be running some webinars through to the end of the year. And there's discovery tools, and we've got some guides around those for things like Windows Analytics and the Enterprise Site Discovery Toolkit. So I think that covers sort of top down. That's, there's quite a lot of quite a body of material available to organisations, and we'd be really keen for you to use that widely within your organisation to make sure everyone has the information that they need for their part of the Windows 10 adoption. Do you want to go to the next slide, Pete? So this slide just talks through the main three guides, which is prepare, deploy and operate, and also the top 10 recommendations. Basically it covers in the prepare guide, it's what are the main milestones when you're preparing your Windows 10 project? What are the prerequisites and recommendations? And we've actually pulled that out into a separate document. The concepts of Windows as a service, and what you might need to do in your organisation to prepare for Windows as a service. It talks about ATP and talks about Windows Analytics. The deploy guide looks at the implementation principles. Again, what are the milestones for your deployment? What are your design inputs that you need to provide around your design? Around your build. What do you want it to do? What are you trying to achieve? Which components need to be in that build? Then it goes on to create to talk around solution design, creating a reference image, deploying your image, securing the environment with group policy, and then talks about the pilot process and the rings of service for rolling out Windows 10. Operate talks about the principles of operating Windows 10, what you need to do to stay current, software updates with Windows 10 and how to handle those, types of Windows update that you need to deal with, what you need to do to ongoing understanding your Windows 10 environment and manage it correctly. I think that's all of that on the Operate guide. And there's just a selection of the top 10 recommendations there. So it's a bit more on Windows as a service, implementing ATP, Windows upgrade readiness, about documenting your environment and setting up your deployment rings of service. So those are the guides. Next slide, Pete. Is he there? Oh. Where do you find the guides? So the core guides have all been published on the Bytes website at that link there. So that's the prerequisites, the prepare, deploy, operate, top 10 Windows recommendations, and recordings. The webinar recordings are on there as well. The additional documents, so there's things such as Windows 10 features appraisal, customization guidance, project planning toolkit, user adoption toolkit, frequently asked questions, and the Head Start is all available by contacting NHS Digital on the email address there. And we're continuing to work on documents in conjunction with Pete and his team. We'll be refining these with a view to providing a final set in sort of November timeframe. Next slide, Pete. I mentioned the webinars. they've been called the Windows 10 Masterclass webinars. We've got basically, I think it's roughly on a 2-week schedule. We're running some short webinars that you're welcome to join, covering initially on the 3rd of October, we'll be covering Windows Analytics. A couple of weeks later, there's a session on Head Start materials and using those materials to produce a Windows 10 image and using the cybersecurity, the GPOs to implement the cybersecurity guidance. Session on in-place upgrades, so that covers both upgrading from Windows 7 and also using in-place upgrades to move from feature release to feature release of Windows 10. We've got a session on Microsoft Edge, which seems to be a topic that comes up in a number of occasions when we talk to trusts. So it talks about Edge, positioning Edge as a modern browser, what you can do with enterprise mode and site compatibility. So to really to centralize or to move forward on a modern browser and how you could perhaps consider sites that perhaps are not yet compatible with Edge. Keeping Windows current is more of a kind of a service management look at keeping Windows current, what you need to do around keeping current, and certainly there's kind of 2 things that you need to do. One is obviously to get current, and then it's really important that you maintain current, because Windows moving forward is much more of a process than a project. And then the last of the webinars is Push Button Reset, which is the ability to get a user-initiated reset of a machine in the field. So we'll be covering that in mid-December. So there's a link there for registering for master classes, and as I say, the first one will be kicking off on the 3rd of October. So I think that covers those. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Again, what we do is we'll send out all of the slides, etc. All of the slides has got all the links in to get access to all of this stuff. So that will give you the routes and where to go. And please share the slides with all of your teams that are involved. Obviously, you know your teams are involved. We don't know everybody. We know you. So please do that. Okay. Thanks very much, Jeff. If I get you to go back on mute and see if I can find Kevin, or Kevin can find a way to get off mute, and I'll bring him in from...
yeah, I'll mute myself, Peter. Yeah,
Kevin, brilliant. You're ahead of me as ever in Blackpool. So over to you to take us through your experiences with Windows 10.
Yeah, no. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Flaherty, the IT Operations Manager over at Blackpool Teaching Hospitals. As a trust, we support a number of CCGs, their associated GPs, a local hospice, and the National Artificial Eye Service. We started our migration to Windows 10 about 18 months ago, and we've been working with a third-party, BDS Solutions, to develop our SCCM to the latest current branch, and also deploy distribution points to all our key sites, basically to help reduce any of the network problems with pulling images from a central server. Also, during that time, we've been developing our gold build and the related group policies that go with that. Can you move on to the next slide, Peter? Yeah, then the next area we focused on was the actual applications that were in use within the trusts. We worked with leads in each of the area to run through the applications that they used and then tested them with Win 10 so that we could be confident that they would work. As a trust, we've been working over the last few years to migrate applications from physical installs onto AppV packages so that we could improve the speed of the install and update them. Now, moving on to the actual deployment of the Win 10 out to the sites, what we did, we identified an area, and using a mixture of asset management systems and site surveys, we identified all the machines in that area. We then developed a pack for that area, which can be shown on the screen there, which basically showed all the applications in use on the machines, any hardware that needed replacing or updating, and that allowed us to quickly identify any machines that would need special attention due to known applications that would not currently work on Win 10, as a couple there you can see shown in red. Right, moving on to the next slide, Peter. Using this pack, support engineer would then visit the machines. They would then run a script that we've generated that copies all the active users, shortcuts and favourites for anyone who's been on that machine in the last 30 days. Then what they did was updated the BIOS on the machine, installed additional memory, we've been using now switching over to SSD, so they load in a pre-staged SSD, start the machine back up, which then runs through the install task sequence and updates that machine to Windows 10. In total, that progress takes about 30 minutes to get the machine ready from the engineer starting on it back on to a user ready to log back in. And as we've been using SCCM for deployment of applications, this then kicks back in and pushes all of the applications back to the machine. So roughly after about 45 minutes to an hour, the machine is back ready for the end user to carry on working on. As you can see from the slide, we now have an excess of 5,000 machines on Windows 10. And as part of the patching process, we've now been able to successfully run in-place updates from 1703, 1709 to 1803. So with that, we're now going to be looking at the additional features that brings in, such as Credential Guard, Application Guard, and Device Guard. And just a quick note, a couple of people may notice there are 2XP machines showing on that screen. Basically, they are analyzers and are segmented away on our network. Unfortunately, we can't get rid of them yet. Next slide, please, Peter. Moving on to ATP, we were early adopters on ATP, or actually running a trial of it before the actual national program came in, so we had a good experience of how it all worked before migrating over. The actual deployment to machines was just a case of going into the settings within the actual onboarding process and then choosing SCCM downloadable package. This is going to be our chosen method. There are other options, such as a script for a single machine or group of machines. We then went through the process of deploying that out to a test machine, testing all was working via the PowerShell script to simulate an actual cyber event. Once that's successful, we then pushed it out to a tester machines and then basically included it into the task sequence on all machines. And now, as you can see from the previous slide that Peter showed, we've now got it out to 100% of our estate. Based on the sheet that Peter was showing before, one of the reasons for the additional machines is that a lot of the machines previously were Win 7 and now are actually on Win 10, so they're in the transition period of the old machines coming off ATP and the new ones on there. Again, moving on to the day-to-day administration of ATP, and it's very simple. Again, it's just a simple web console, no additional installs required. So once you sign the systems, you're presented with the screen you see on the slide, which gives you an overview of any machines or users that have risk associated with them, and any current alerts that are active or under investigation. We're also able to see a breakdown of machine coverage, including all the components such as antivirus, smart screen, Credential Guard, and how they're configured and working. And basically, all my engineers now basically going through this are very impressed with the way it works, the information it gives, the way you can actually trace back through and track down to patient zero of any kind of installs that come through. So again, yeah, that's me finished. If anyone's got any questions.
Okay, thanks very much. What I'll do is if everyone could raise questions, we'll pick those up in just a couple of minutes, a sort of panel session at the end when I'll etc. So if you stay with us for a bit, Kevin, that'd be fine. Can I just ask a couple of questions? I mean, you've rolled out across both primary care, a mixed estate, acute, primary care, community, etc. What any particular challenges in each area that you found that have been different? What's the most challenging area, and what are the things to look out for in those areas?
The most challenging area we've had is actually within the acute side, due to the number of applications that are in use. When it came to community and the GP, it wasn't too bad. There was GP land, there's a number of systems out there, the likes of DocMan and that. And what we actually did as part of that work, we've tried to work with the CCG to try and standardise on a single version across the practices to try and, again, anything moving forward, it's a lot simpler than the individual ones. But yeah, our main issue is around the acute and bespoke little applications in departments that we found. For example, someone creating an old Access database that they're using.
And so have you been having to sort of go through a process of rationalising that at the same time, or as part of the overall thing, or how have you been managing that?
Yeah, what we've tried to do on instances like that, we've engaged with our informatics department, and what they've done is try and then bring it into our bespoke BI system, and then getting them to actually develop that, so it's actually then centrally managed rather than like an Access database. Again, with each of the departments, it's going through chatting with the system admins of the systems, working with them to get the updated version, and then again trying to make sure that's compatible with Win 10 before we actually start migrating them.
Yeah. Okay. No, thanks very much. And one other question before I move on to the other things available. You've got a pretty good handle on how much resource and sort of cost it's actually sort of taken to do this. Now you've done it, obviously. What's the sort of resource loading look like for running a program of this across your estate?
What we've done, we brought in an extra 4 engineers, and that was more around the CCG, because one of the things that they've done is they've had a big change in working. A number of them have actually now all switched to laptops rather than desktops, and actually so they've got dedicated devices they're taking out. So that was a whole different program, and there's a lot of the time with a one-to-one with MGPs running through that, so that's why we had them additional resources. From a main acute, we've got a couple of people looking after it from a PM perspective, a dedicated resource for assistance with that, and the rest of the machines are basically being upgraded in overtime by existing engineers on an evening, weekends. So when we've got the process now where if you go to a big site, on a Saturday with about 10 engineers, we can do 150, 200 machines over that weekend upgraded for a site. So.
Okay, thanks very much. That's really helpful. I'm sure that'll help start with people think about more their planning as well as they're looking at their own programs. We'll come back to that, and I'm sure lots of other people have questions later. But Kevin, thank you very much for giving us a brief tour of Blackpool and your experiences there. And as I said before, what we'll do is we'll ask other organisations to come on and sort of share their experience on each of these calls as we go forward. So thanks very much.
No worries.
Okay, right, we've talked about a lot of the support so far. I just wanted to summarise where things are available and what's happening for the next few months. So this is very much a telling you what we're going to tell you session, so you can see what's coming up and make the best use of that. So if I look at the things that are happening over the autumn period, what we've got set up are these monthly update webinar calls. So these are our sort of management reviews. So we'll be inviting the senior manager and the primary contact to those. Obviously, if you want to be the deputy or send the deputy, that's fine. But these are the management calls that we've got going on here. So there's the one today, 18th of October, 14th of November, 13th of December. 11 o'clock each time, and we'll record these and send out all the slides of them, but it's always great if people can, if you've got time to drop in and hear it firsthand and raise any questions and actually create the show, so to speak. So that's the management level stuff. The technical delivery piece around ATP, we've got a weekly ATP clinic you can drop into, so please come along to those. Just drop in and out. If you've got any questions, bring them along. We'll sort of cover topics of the day as we go through from what's been coming into the mailbox, but that's there to help you get live, your administrators and controllers. We'll also be running what we're calling a master's education program. Now this is, obviously there's lots of documentation, things to read on the ATP portal, etc. But we wanted to do something which is a little bit more structured to take your controllers and reporters through a program of education to understand the new tool that you've got. So that'll be kicking off later in October. We're working with the Microsoft product team that built this on that. So those will be a series of webinars, probably 4 or 5 webinars on specific topics to come along to. Again, they'll be there, they'll be live, they'll be recorded. People can do that, and you can register for those now. I'll give the links in just a second. The next thing we'll be doing is, obviously, with ATP, what we're doing here is we're building a community of a large number of people who are sharing the management of this up and down the country. We've got 700 NHS organisations, ATP controllers and reporters of each of them. And then, obviously, we've got our SOC analysts at the national level, and we're all working together to make the most of ATP. So rather than just stick with webinars all the time, we'll actually be going out on the road 6th, 7th and 8th of November. And we'll be there to go through that, and we'll have the Microsoft designers who built the product as well over with us to sort of have a far more in-depth guide about how ATP works and what's coming up next, etc. So that should be a really good day for your ATP controllers if you can get there. We'll do some more in other locations in the new year, but if you can get to those, that would be good, and it'd be lovely to meet you face to face and to meet the people that you're sharing ATP with. On the Windows 10 side, we've already, as Jeff said, got all the guides to help with preparation, deployment, operation, and the Head Start images, etc. So I'll just give you the links to get those in a minute. The thing I'd recommend, as Jeff talked about, is to join us on the Windows 10 masterclasses that we're doing going through October. And again, those are the dates there. If you register using the link coming up soon, you can register for any or all of those and turn up to the ones that you want. Again, they'll be recorded and shared out, so but it's always good to have people on the live event. The other thing we'll be doing is with Bytes, we're using our deployment vouchers that came with the agreement to create some free deployment planning sessions, and we'll be telling you how to apply for those and share those shortly. And then the other thing, similar to the ATP calls, we're just going to start a sort of regular drop-in thing, Windows Wednesdays, so just dial in with any issues, questions, concerns, you can share with us and the Microsoft team of what's coming up there so we can resolve your issues there. So these are the things coming up, and hopefully that's a useful outlay of that. If you want to go on the if you want the links for those, this slide, please use this. Please share this with anyone who wants to see it. That tells you where you can get the implementation guide. We're sending those out to people when they're registering. Obviously, it sort of contains things which we don't want to broadcast to everyone, so we'll send that to the people who've got service nominated under the service agreement to have it. The ATP basic training module is the 40-minute video, which is already there at Bytes, and please look at that if you haven't already. The ATP clinics, there's the link for that. You don't need to register, just drop in and whenever you want. The Masters program, you do need to register for that, so please click on the link and follow that, and then you can register. And I think the best thing to do is consider that as sort of essential reading, viewing for all of your controllers and reporters, because I'm sure everyone wants to make sure that the ATP service is being managed well. The ATP live events, just register there. We should have a place for everybody who wants to come to all of those. If we do get some pressure on space, then we might have to prioritise there, but please come along because it's always great to meet people in person. The changes for administrators, we're in the process of putting a new self-service portal up, which will be via NHSNet. It's very similar to the NHS mail LOA thing. So, but that's not quite live yet. So for the time being, any other help, changes or administrations or anything else come to the ATP feedback mailbox there. So those are all the links for the ATP help and how to register for the various events going through the autumn period. If I go through the same thing for Windows 10, the best practice guides that Jeff was talking about earlier, they're already there on the Bytes website. If you want the Head Start image, just email us at our team mailbox, windows10@nhs.net, and we'll FTP it across to you. The license keys, you get those in Bytes. They're managing that for us. The masterclasses, there's the registration link, and having just been through sat through the rehearsal for the Windows upgrade, Analytics upgrade readiness one yesterday, that'll be really good. That's 3rd of October, so that's when they start. Please register for those. Windows Wednesdays, that's where you get to there, and any other help, that's the program team. So hopefully those are useful, and again, please share these with anyone in your teams who you want to involve in this. I mentioned that we're going to be doing some free deployment planning packages. So we've got some sort of free consultancy days with the agreement by Bytes. And so we'll be writing out shortly to invite people to apply for those. So if you need help with any stage of moving forward from basic planning or sort of wanting to, you've already started, but to sort of do a bit more, then we'll be making these available for people. We'll probably be able to fund around about 50 people, 50 organisations to have the consultancy here. So please look out for those and then apply. We'll be awarding them quite quickly, and we'll be looking for them to be used quite quickly. So please look out for that. More on that shortly. So please don't email us. We'll email you. I just wanted to let you know that it was coming and prepare to take advantage of that. So that's the sort of rundown of where things are and everything. Hopefully that's useful. I just wanted to now turn across to the questions and answers. So I'll just bring up chat facility and go through that. If you've got any other questions, please raise those as we go through, but I'll just start from the top and go down. We've got about 10, 15 minutes, so hopefully we'll be able to get through all of those. So if I start at the top, the first one I've found from Bryn Pritchard is managing 3 trusts with ATP. How do we get trust to set up team members as admins for ATP? I think best thing to do is, Bryn, on that specific one, just email us at atpfeedback@nhs.net and we'll work that through with you. So that, hopefully that'll be fine. So that's a good specific one. Tony and Anthony, been having trouble getting ATP with MMA set up to pass through the proxy. Yeah, there's a few people have had problems with proxy. Can you, Anthony, sorry if you haven't got a response from that. Just to be clear, there's about 600 of you and there's a few of us, so sometimes we are a bit slow. Could you drop me an email at atpfeedback@nhs.net and I will look at for it personally and make sure that gets dealt with. Alison Hudson, I think you were looking at the, oh yeah, you were seeing looking at the recording that comes through of Windows 10, you know, of devices connected to ATP. Yeah, obviously we can see how many are being used and which versions are licensing, etc. So your answer about can we use that as a mechanism to sort of manage licensing on this? Broadly, yes. It's not exactly the same, but I think that can get us around a load of having to go deal with TrueUp and us asking for license declarations all the time. So yeah, once everything's connected to ATP, that solves that problem, which again is one key make sure that we do that. Alison, again, licenses issued in August. Yes, 180 days of the backstop is end of January. That's the agreement backstop. I would prefer everything to get done by December if you can. It does 2 things. One is it protects the NHS, it protects you. It also makes it easier to sort of manage people, the whole thing through if everyone's working to similar targets. It's always difficult getting a whole load of people to sign up to do agreements in exactly the same time, so I know that that's spread. But if you can stick with us on the run to December, that'd be great. I had a question in from Rosalie. It was private, but I'll read it out because it's an important one. And Kevin, I'd quite like if you could give your comment on this, because it's about System Center Configuration Manager. Rosalie asked, if System Center Configuration Manager is used to manage a client estate, will we need to operate SCCM current branch to make a success of Windows 10? I think that the answer on that is yes. But Kevin, what to be your experience with using SCCM up in Blackpool, and what would you recommend about people using it?
Yeah, from an SCCM perspective, we actually upgraded to current branch. One of the reasons where it did start introducing some of the more advanced features for the in-place upgrades for the version control of Windows software, like from 1703 upwards to 1803. So, and there's a couple of other little features. So I think for what we wanted, it was there, but I wouldn't like to say that you couldn't do it without it.
Thanks, Kevin. Greg Cottage, I think you're on the call. Are you able to get yourself off mute and give your perspective from Microsoft? Not sure if he's going to be able to. Or Jeff Young?
So it's John Smith here.
Oh, hello, John. Hello, John.
Hello. Just to say that, yes, from a support perspective, then yes, you do need to be on current branch SCCM for Windows 10 integration. However, that's not to say that 2012 doesn't work with Windows 10. There are some ways to get it to work. I'll just post in the chat window the official statement from Microsoft as to which version of Config Manager supports which versions of Windows 10. So I'll just paste that in now.
Okay, thanks very much. And what I'll do is I'll remember to take a cut and paste of the chat window before I shut down the call, and then include that in sending out so everyone's still got that as well. While I've got you on there, John, for everyone who doesn't know John, he's part of the Microsoft Services team working with us. The question from Stephen Pratt about the policy of hiding non-business stuff like Xbox, etc., as opposed to removing it. What's the rationale behind there?
So it is possible in later versions to remove the consumer experience, which is all those applications on the enterprise version. We have found that if you do it on your image, there is a chance that when you do your in-place upgrade, and if that's not controlled by group policy or other mechanisms, that it will come back. Because basically it's a new OS that gets uploaded each time. So unless you're doing a new reference image each time and deploying that, they may come back. But there are numerous posts around how to disable that through group policy or other means. So we can post that link in as well.
Yeah, perhaps you can pick that up. So thanks very much, Stephen, for that point. Moving swiftly on, just trying to get to as many questions before with the time we've got. David Hume asked about the Microsoft support for Windows 10 releases being increased from 18 to 30 months. Yes, and John, you might have to correct us on the specifics, but this is a recent announcement in the last couple of weeks, isn't it? That the support for the fall editions, so these are the ones in the September, October of each year, is 30 months, and I believe the support for the spring editions is still less, isn't it? It's 24 or 18. Have I got that right?
Yep, that's absolutely right. Yeah. So the 03 editions each year will be 18-month support life cycles, and the 09 editions will be 30-month life cycles.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing for everyone to note, because it makes managing the estate a lot easier than people thinking that you have to sort of keep up with each 6 months of releases. So I think that's a really welcome change, certainly for everyone in the NHS.
Just on that, Pete, we within Microsoft we're still waiting for our own internal guidance around that. So I think there's a bit of watch this space before we need to get behind the understanding of why Microsoft are doing that and what the implications might be. So watch this space for further information. Yeah,
the news has been announced, but the detail to follow. Okay. But,
and the rationale and what we would recommend organisations do, that's not there yet.
Yeah, but we'll pick that up over the next few months as we have that clear.
Sure.
Okay. Rosalie asked the same question about current branch, etc. So I think I've covered that before. Stephen Forster is a private question, but I'll read it out again because it may happen to other people. It said you're having issues with the 1803 builds not showing up in the ATP console. Has the onboarding script changed since the original rollout? No, but if you've got a problem, then please email us at atpfeedback@nhs.net and we'll get on to that one. So we're not sure what the issue is there, but we'll work that through. Glad to see, okay, Brian and Rosalie having a conversation. That's good about SCCM. Please feel free to have chats about anything while we're on these calls. Chris Stoneham asked about Head Start. You get hold of that by just emailing us at windows10@nhs.net, and we'll get that FTP'd across to you for the Head Start stuff. The other toolkits at the moment we'll be publishing those as well, but for the time being we'll get those to you as well. So just email windows10@nhs.net and we'll get those across to you. We'll just go through. I think there's a bit of conversation there. I'm not sure. Yes, but the websites for where everything is the Bytes website, which you covered earlier. Chris Stoneham, this is a good point of how to deploy with NDT. I think that would be a good idea to sort of share experiences there. So I'll pick that up as perhaps a Windows topic for us to do. So leave that one with me as an action, Chris, but thank you very much for suggesting that. I think that would be useful for everybody. Just moving down. Okay, so Ian Ullman, as a his, have a number of organisations listed on the original form having problems with the ATP console only showing the lead organisations and leading the other ODS codes. Yeah, we need to work through where there's a header organisation managing multiple local or child organisations. We can configure it to get the various codes seen, so you can look at that. And I'm sorry that we haven't been able to resolve that one ourselves so far, but we'll pick that up with you again. I think, to be fair, I think you said, is it a common issue that we are having more issues in getting the configuration of the ODS codes and child and parent-child relationships. Those are the more complex ones, so they are harder to sort out. So it is something that we're finding with CSUs and his is to agree the structure and get that mapped together. So it's not straightforward. So that's why that is more complex, because you've got more different organisations and mapping more controllers and reporters to them. So it is a common issue, and we'll work that one through with you. But thanks very much for raising that. It's a lot easier if you're just one organisation managing several thousand devices. Brian Jones, as an HSA and it's hosted by Trust, getting your onboard, you're going to probably do onboard config packages. Again, email us at atpfeedback@nhs.net. We'll pick that one up and get back to you that's specific. Steve Anthony has asked ATP for the workstation estate and anything similar for the Windows estate. At the moment, the ATP service is just being paid for the client end of the equation. That's what the funding is there for. ATP can monitor Windows servers and it can monitor non-Windows devices as well. However, at this point, we're focusing on getting the client end rolled out, and we'll consider what to do about servers, etc. That's a DH policy decision and funding decision. So, yes, it can do it, but at the moment, it doesn't, because that's not what's paid for. So watch this space. It's an obvious logical question and development, but let's get the first million plus endpoints done first, and then we have a better case to go back to DH to say we'd like to do more. Alison Hudson, question about unencryption activities prior to an in-place work upgrade. John, or Kevin, actually, probably, if you want to come back with a response on that, I think that was to you.
Yeah, sorry, I was just muting myself. Yeah, basically we're not currently using the exploit application guard. Basically, it's one of the things I'm looking now. We're starting to get all this data over onto 1803, so that's our next area we're looking at.
Okay.
Just
Kevin,
to answer the unencryption of the in-place upgrades, we haven't had any issues if you're using BitLocker, but there has been some cases where there's third-party tools involved. They just had to basically disable the service, do the in-place upgrade, and then re-enable the service at the end of it. But that's not on every third party, and it's only when going to sort of the latest versions of Windows 10 at this stage.
Okay, thanks, John. So hopefully that's something to look out for, Alison, down at R- to start helping, depending on what you're using there. Kevin,
Pete,
also the question.
it's Greg here. Can you
Hello,
hear
Greg.
me now? Sorry,
I can hear you now, mate.
Unmute myself. Yeah, in terms of the third-party encryption, obviously work with your vendors. It's highly likely that there'll be updated versions of the software or patches potentially that need to be applied potentially before you upgrade or as part of that upgrade. So, yeah, as John mentions, we don't see any problems with BitLocker, but if it's a third-party encryption, then yeah, you need to kind of check with your vendors for the various support or supported versions for whatever Windows 10 version you're moving to.
Okay, thanks very much, Greg. I'm going to canter on because we've just technically run over, but I'll keep going for a few minutes. Kevin, David Hume asked whether you're using Export or Application Guard with ATP. Are you up in Blackpool?
No, sorry, I was jumping ahead with that. My last answer to the question, I was just getting to that one. No, we're not at the moment. As I said, it's part of the 1803 work we're going to be doing next. Now we're starting to get all our machines updated, so that will be our next big focus, as well as Application Guard.
Yeah, thanks very much. Moving swiftly on, a question from Alison about the ATP clinic on the 6th of November, which clashes with the ATP live event. We probably will cancel it for that week because I think the team will be busy running the live event, so that will clash. Just quickly going on to some other questions. Greg's been answering some questions as he went along there, so hopefully I won't go through those, etc. Okay, and I think somebody that raised this earlier about is Chris Stoneham again, about MDT. We'll get on to looking at some MDT stuff as well, and I've picked that up as an action, Chris, so thank you so much for doing that. I'm just going through. I think there's one other question for Kevin from Robin Priest. What deployment decisions did you make with regard to Windows 10? For instance, did you go with 64 with GPT and UEFI, or what did you decide to do?
Yeah, basically we've gone full x64 with GPT and UEFI. Apart from on a handful of our older machines that didn't support it, so that we've gone with legacy while we look to replace them out over the next 12 months with our PC replacement program.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, I think that's dealt with all of the questions, so thanks very much for that. As I said, I'll take a cut and paste of the chat box before I shut down the call, and then I'll send that out as well. So it's got lots of useful answers in there from the team and links, etc. So last thing I just wanted to leave people with, thank you very much for staying on a couple of minutes more. So the next steps are quite simple. So please, ATP is fully authorized for deployment, so please deploy it fully now. Make sure that you get your ATP administrators to register for the Masters program. The link's there. You'll be able to click on that with the slides when you get them. And also, it would be really nice to meet people in the flesh, so please do come along to the ATP live event as well. Keep on with the planning for Windows 10, and please do use the masterclasses and come to Windows Wednesdays when they start up in the middle of October. The thing I would reiterate again is please ensure that you make full use of the licenses available, and it'd be lovely to see everyone back here on this call next month, and if you just follow that link, then you'll be able to register for next month's upgrade webinar. So at that point, I'm going to close down the call. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to attend, and I'll look forward to seeing you at the next update, which is on the 18th of October. Thanks very much for joining. Cheers then.